Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Anchor Recovery Community Center, what we like to call the Recovery Hub of Rhode Island. My name is Tom Joyce. I'm the Associate Director of Recovery Support Services here at Anchor Recovery Community Center as well as at Providence Center. But most importantly, I'm a person in long-term recovery. And as Jim Gillen would say, as a result, my life got a whole lot better. Amen. By being in long-term recovery, today I have the opportunity and the ability to be a better father, better husband, better friend, better brother, better son. But most importantly, today I have the ability to help another human being, which is most important to me. We are honored here today that the governor has chosen Anchor as a site to sign the Good Samaritan Overdose Prevention Act. There's no secret that there's an overdose crisis here in the state of Rhode Island. This law saves lives. Not just the lives of the people who recover from the overdose, but their families and friends' lives that are devastated by the loss of a loved one. We believe in the recovery community that addiction is a disease, but most importantly, that recovery is possible and is a reality. Look around the room today. There's many people here in the recovery community that are living testament that recovery works. The Good Samaritan law makes it easier for people to access critical treatment and recovery supports at a time in crisis. We applaud the leadership in Rhode Island for their swift action and thank the governor for supporting the recovery community during the tenure here. I'd like to say thank you and acknowledge some of the distinguished guests that we have here, Governor Raimondo. We also have Mayor Donald Grebien, who's been a great supporter of us here in the city of Pawtucket. Senator Michael McCaffrey, who sponsored the bill in the Senate, as well as Representative Robert Craven. And we have a lot of other distinguished guests. A.T. Walls here, Colonel O'Donnell. It's a long list, so I'm not going to go through everybody because we'll never get out of here. But first, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Mayor of Pawtucket, Donald Grebien.
So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this great city of Pawtucket. We're all excited to be here as the governor does the right thing, as we all know, and supportive thing. We talk about support, so I want to just mention a couple things. You talk about support, and we all have it, we all need it, right? So my wife supported me to make sure that I wore purple on behalf of Anchor Recovery today, so I want to point that out. And so we all know that support and that partnership is truly important. You know, for years we've talked about how cities and towns and our state need to work together, how we have to address addiction, how we have to support one another. And, you know, we have the bill that's been signed by the governor, going to be signed by the governor, and it truly is that type of collaboration. Tom knows, you know, Jim Gillen is smiling down on us today, as this, right? And we're so proud to have you as our partner in this community. I do have to take care of one political thing because as the mayor of the city, I do have to give a shout out to, no disrespect to all the wonderful reps and senators that are here, but my delegation. So I see Representative Johnson is here, Representative Messier, Tobon and Barros, Representative Coughlin as well. And Colonel O'Donnell, I want to give a special shout out to because he made sure that the Pawtucket police didn't give me a ticket as we were walking in here. So thank you, Colonel. And also Councilwoman Kano is here as well. But people have been reluctant for years to be the Good Samaritan because the rules have been against us for many different reasons. We've all been fearful. Today, because of the leadership with Senator McCaffrey and Representative Craven and the governor, we're actually going to be able to relieve some of that fear. We all know it's not going to change the world overnight, but it is a good tool and a good process. So as the mayor of the city, I'm glad and welcome the governor here and excited to be hosting the signing and really appreciate the partnership that we have with Anchor. Now, part of my responsibility is to introduce you now, Tom, right, for your next speaking point. So, Thomas Joyce, thank you for your partnership and leadership in this.
Thank you, Mayor. Next, I'd like to introduce the reason why we're all here today, our guest of honor, Governor Gina Raimondo.
Thank you. Thank you and good afternoon. It may not change the world, Mayor, but it is going to save lives. It's going to save lives, and one life at a time is the way you change the world, and saving one life is worth it. And that's why we're all here. I am happy to be back. I've been here many times, strong supporter of Anchor, and this is a great day, and what a fantastic turnout. Thank you all, every one of you, for taking time to be here to express your support for the recovery community. In a few minutes, I'm going to sit over there and sign the Good Samaritan Act, And it would not have happened without the swift action of the General Assembly. Let's give them a hand. In the front row, Senator Michael McCaffrey, Rep. Craven. They got back here in the new session. They wasted no time. They got to work. They found a compromise bill. They passed it, and we're going to sign it right now. And in this day and age, when politicians don't always agree and sometimes we let things stand in the way, you ought to feel good that the legislature made it happen. And I know there are many reps and senators here, so thank you to every single one of you for getting this done. And you ought to feel very good about yourselves. Take a second to especially recognize Rhoda Perry, who I think is here. There you go. Hi, Rhoda. Good to see you. She's dedicated. A very personal issue for you, one that you've dedicated your life to, and you should feel great because you had a lot to do with this, as you know. I need to recognize Dr. Scott, who's an incredible leader and very committed to this, and Maria Montanaro, incredibly committed to this. You guys are great. I'm blessed to have you on my team. We together convened a task force earlier this year, but last year, and we're committed. You know, we set a goal. We're driving forward with a focused action plan to reduce overdose deaths in Rhode Island by 1/3 within 3 years. And we're going to do that. And when we do it, that's hundreds of lives. That is hundreds of lives. This won't be easy. No one group is going to do it. In fact, everyone in this room has to do it. It has to be the colonels here. It has to be public safety, coming together with the mayor, coming together with the state, coming together with the legislature, together with Anchor, to pull together. But we can do this because just in the past year, we've lost over 225 lives to drug overdose. 225 lives. That's 225 people that should be alive. So we're going to cut that by 1/3, and I believe we can do that. Now, how are we going to do it? I want to work with the legislature to make sure we have peer recovery coaches like the ones you have here at Anchor. We know it works, so let's do more of it. It's a good investment. And we also need to make sure that naloxone, the medicine that we know works, is available and easily accessible and affordable. So that's what we have to work to do. I also would like to especially recognize Colonel O'Donnell and his leadership, and I'm very pleased to let you know that together we'll be directing over $40,000 in Google settlement funds to be used by the Rhode Island State Police and local police departments to purchase and distribute naloxone in the most heavily hit communities. It's not enough, but it's a step forward. It's not enough, but it's a step forward. Signing this Good Samaritan bill is not enough, but it's a big step forward. And getting more recovery coaches, this is what we're going to do together. Because we are committed in our shared belief that addiction is a disease and recovery is possible. And if we come together, we're going to make that recovery possible for the people of Rhode Island who are our friends. Just like the mayor said, these are our friends. These are our brothers and sisters, literally. These are our sons and daughters. They don't want to be in this situation. And it's on us to make sure that we get them the care they need so they can get out of it. All right? So thank you. I'll turn it back over to you. We'll go through this, and then we'll get to the main event.
Thank you, Governor. This law is exactly the tools that we need, along with the strategic plan, to help us, aid us, the ones that have the boots on the ground. As I often say, we're not going to win the war on drugs anytime soon, but we can minimize the damage, and these are the tools exactly that we need. So next, I'd like to bring up our champion in the House of Representatives who sponsored this bill and got it pushed through for us, Representative Robert Craven.
I think I could say that the governor said everything I was going to say, so I could just sit down.
Microphone.
Oh, right here? This one? Okay. Thank you. Robert Craven, I represent the town of North Kingstown. But the interesting thing is, this problem happens there too. Every day. this word disease is something that is not understood by most people in the state. It's a disease. If this were some communicable germ that killed 250 people a year, I could suggest to you that we would have people from the Center for Disease Control here investigating the cause and effect. The cause and effect is simple, and that is giving people the tools to overcome addiction. There are a lot of different ways that that's accomplished. This is one of those ways, and I was happy to be part of that. But I want to acknowledge some people here who had an intimate role in bringing this to my attention. And first I wanted to acknowledge one of the senior members of the House of Representatives, Edith Agello, who is here today. And quite frankly, Edith put the idea in my head. So thank you, Edith. Some might have thought it was strange that a former prosecutor would be someone who would be sponsoring immunity. But thanks to people like Edith Agello, I got educated about the specifics of how to solve this problem. Chairman Keeble, who is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, I could not have been more eloquent if I were to have spoken to the reasons why the House should vote for this bill. Thank you very much for your support. Leader DeSimone, Representative Marshall, and Representative Fogarty is here today as well, along with Dave Bennett from Warwick, who was the state rep, who actually has sponsored the bill when it passed in reference to Narcan, believe it or not, in elementary schools and middle schools and high schools, because this is a really serious problem. Representative Johnson, Representative Taban, Representative Coughlin, Representative Messier, Representative Barrows, and obviously I mentioned Edith, and former Representative Tommaso. You guys pointed us in the right direction. We've been able to use the legislative powers and tools, and the governor is about to sign it into law. And believe me, she was a champion of this. There's no question that I was motivated, and I believe that Chairman McCaffrey was motivated, but we didn't want to make her mad at us. It's the Catholic school student in me, you know. But we can look back now in the days and weeks and months to come, because the statistical numbers speak for themselves. 250 people a year is roughly one every day and a half. And we can say there's few opportunities as a legislator that you can actually say with a legitimate factual cause and effect that we saved a life today. Well, we did. So I'm looking forward someday actually to meeting one of those people who will say that Narcan saved my life and that I'm in recovery. So, well, stand up. Thanks. So there's something special going on here with this community that is gathered here today. Ironically, I did not know that purple was the color. And true story, a colorblind person picked this out of the closet this morning. So there's got to be something going on here. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call up our champion in the Rhode Island Senate, Senator Michael McCaffrey.
Thank you. It's certainly an honor and a pleasure to be here this afternoon. And when I walked in, and a gentleman by the name of Tom Joyce came up and introduced himself to me. Years ago, I knew the Joyce family, his mother and father, his brother and sister, and it was a beautiful thing to see him here today. Present here from the Senate, there are two champions on this legislation, and I call them senators because once you're a senator, you're always a senator. One is Senator Rhoda Perry, and I'd like her to stand and let everyone acknowledge her. and the other is my colleague, Josh Miller. Josh Miller is the one who really worked on me to put this bill in and help me along the way. Thank you, Josh. Most of us here know that it wouldn't be a success if it wasn't for Rhoda Perry back in 2012 when she put the original bill in, because she was afraid that people who were calling 911 were going to get arrested. And I'm going to read to you a quote that she made back then, and it's still true today. And Senator Perry said, "Ultimately, saving a life is much more important than an arrest or a lawsuit. This bill is about putting lives first." And that's what this legislation does. It allows people to make that phone call to save a life. And if it saves one life, and we've had a number of people stand up this afternoon who were saved by the Narcan, then it's well worth it. The enforcement of the drug laws, of course, they're very important. However, public safety is not just enforcing laws, it's also saving lives, and that's what this does. Certainly, I want to thank Governor Raimondo for her work on this, and Chairman Craven for working swiftly to get this legislation back on the books. Also, we're going to hear from Jonathan Goyer, who will speak a little while of the many in the recovery community have bravely stepped forward to share their stories, and in doing so have helped my colleagues in the Senate and the House to understand the importance of this legislation. And it's certainly an honor and pleasure for me to be here, and I look forward to signing the bill. Thank you.
Get this back in here. Actually, Jonathan. Next, I'd like to introduce, it's an honor to introduce this gentleman. This is what we call about bringing the human touch to the room. This is peer-to-peer recovery at its finest. A gentleman in long-term recovery himself. I'd like to introduce Jonathan Goyer.
A lot of people here. Crazy. All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My name is Jonathan, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. What the heck does that mean, you might ask? Let me elaborate. I'm an employee. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a Rhode Island citizen. I'm an outreach worker. I'm a guy who sometimes buys suits and wears them on occasion. I'm a licensed and insured motor vehicle driver. I'm a voter. I'm a volunteer for multiple nonprofit organizations. I like pancakes. I enjoy traveling and learning. I'm a son, a friend, a cousin, a nephew, and a neighbor. I'm an overdose survivor. Drugs and alcohol took me to some very dark places. I began to steal, lie, cheat, and manipulate in every way possible to everyone around me in order to maintain my habit. It forced me to become something that I never intended to be, and ultimately left me unemployable and homeless. I gave up on myself and my goal of ever living a normal, productive life within society. One person never left me, and that person is my mother, who's here today. I'd like her to stand up. She's the real hero in the room, putting up with me for so many years. But it was that helped me get through this. An active addiction, my addiction left me feeling confused, controlled, hopeless, and desperate every single minute of my existence. 3 years ago, it led me to consume a fatal dose of opiates. My lifeless body was discovered shortly after, and I was administered Narcan while waiting for 911 rescue. The person that found me called 911 and saved my life. The Good Samaritan law will alleviate that pressuring moment when one person must weigh the worth of a human life against their own personal freedom. I'm thrilled to see this bill passed with broadened immunity to people on probation and parole, and with no sunset provision. I would like to thank Senators McCaffrey and Miller, along with Representative Craven and Keeble, for introducing this bill. Enacting this legislation is a big victory for us today, but we are far from winning the war. The process in which this legislation was streamlined was unprecedented. 21 days into session, and it passed. This took extreme collaboration, coordination, participation, immense determination, and a little bit of common sense. If Rhode Island is going to see a decrease in death numbers this year over last year, we must expedite and execute all of the initiatives outlined in the governor's strategic plan in this exact same manner. We must work together as a community to immediately determine priority, identify funding sources, produce accountability, and make these resources sustainable. The disease of addiction knows no limits. I say, nor should our solutions during this time of crisis. These are lives, these aren't numbers. As my story illustrates, not only is recovery possible, but recovery is a reality. I say this on behalf of my fellow peers and my fellow overdose survivors. We must continue to fight this fight until resources are sustainable, families are reconnected, and this epidemic is curbed. With that, let's sign this bill and get back to work.
Okay, we ready? I'm sorry. Make it not official. Let's see. Robert Craven? Right here. Someone help me out here. Sir? Senator McCaffrey?
There you go, Mike.
This a long time.